Well, it was described to me a few days ago by an interested voter that we've never had a candidate quite like Ronny Jackson run for Congress in the 13th District, just from the background and experience he has and the connections he has in the White House. So people may be looking at you and they say, hey, this guy, he's a Washington guy and everything, but you actually served in the White House through your military capacity, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a Washington guy. I literally just retired from the United States Navy on December the 1st and got into the race a few days later. So I'm no shape, form, and fashion am I a military or am I someone from Washington. That's just a crazy accusation that's being put out there right now by my opponent because really they don't have much else to hang their hat on. I was born and raised right here in the state of Texas. I am full-blood Texan, and everyone in my family for generations and generations back are Texans. And I was born in the base of the Panhandle, in a small rural farming community that's dominated by nothing but cotton and oil and gas. That's where I was born and raised. I left Texas 25 years ago, the day that I left to join the Navy and serve my country. The very first opportunity that I had, which was just a few months ago, to come back home to Texas when I got out of the Navy, I came straight back to Texas. I live and I own a home in Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo is my home, and whether my opponent wants to admit it or not, that's where I live. That's my home. My entire family. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters. My mom and dad are still in Levelland. I have cousins, aunts, and uncles strung out all over the Texas Panhandle in North Texas. Whether it's Tulia or up around Lake Meredith or Canyon or Borger or Pampa, I got folks all over the area. And so this is my home. I've come home now after 25 years of active duty in the military, and I think it's insulting to me that my opponent is trying to use that, and somehow or another imply that I'm not as much a Texan as he is because I've been gone 25 years serving my country. And Thomas, I'll tell you, I need to ask him what he's been doing for the last 14 or 15 years because he's been working a lot in Austin and D.C., and he's been working as a lobbyist. And if there's anybody that can be labeled as part of the D.C. swamp, it's my opponent. He's a lobbyist. So I'll just leave it at that right now, but it's a little bit personally offensive when that comes up.
Well, you kind of parlayed into my next question. Prior to the March 3rd primary, your opponent, Josh Winegarner, started running a television ad. It was targeting you and Chris Ekstrom at the time, and it's worth noting that Chris Ekstrom, who was the 3rd place finisher in that primary, has endorsed you. But he was running an ad saying that you are a big city carpetbagger, I believe. And he was saying that you're part of the D.C. swamp. You made it very clear that you object to the way that he described you as a member of the D.C. swamp. But do you think that his past as a lobbyist and his record as a lobbyist qualifies him to be considered a member of the D.C. swamp?
I absolutely do, and I'll explain to you why. First off, let me tell you, that it's ridiculous to say that I am a carpetbagger from D.C. That's you might as well say that I'm a carpetbagger from Iraq. I have served all over this country and all over this world during my 25 years of active duty. That includes on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, and that includes all over the United States. The first 11 years that I was in the United States Navy, my wife and I and our kids moved 8 times in the first 11 years. So I've lived all over the place, and for him to try to label me as a carpetbagger from my last duty station, which was at the White House with President Trump, is ridiculous. And once again, it's insulting. And, he absolutely is part of the swamp. He's been, slowly but surely, as this race goes on, he's becoming, the poster boy for the swamp, to be quite honest with you. And, he's been a lobbyist for 14 years. And I'll tell you my problem with lobbyists, Thomas. And here's the deal. I know that he's a lobbyist for the Texas Cattle Feeders Association. I know that, he's lobbying for issues that sometimes are important to our ranchers and our farmers and stuff here. And you better bet I'm going to be involved in those issues. And those are issues that are important to me as well. But he's got to go back and he's got to defend his record for the last 14 years. And as the lead lobbyist for the Texas Cattle Feeders Association and as their, quote, political director or whatever his title is, he's been intimately involved in what they do. They've given hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to Democrats all over this country in the last 14 years. He has assisted them, and he has led the way in their efforts to give money to Democrats. That includes Joaquin Castro, right? The famous twin brother of Julio Castro, who ran for president, right? And a well-known far-left liberal. That includes Henry Cuellar, right? Another Texas, politician who has been described by Nancy Pelosi as one of her closest allies. These are the people that they've been giving money to. And once again, I'm telling you, they've been giving money to them for reasons, that are important to folks here. But here's my problem with that. If you are giving money to Democrats in this country, which they have been, led by my opponent, Josh Winegarner, you are giving money to elect people that not only may, cast a vote in your direction every now and then for your particular industry, but those are people that are working hard right now every single day to make abortion legal, to take away our gun rights, they're lobbying for open borders. They want to give undocumented citizens in this country the right to vote, so on and so forth. So for the last 14 years, he's going to need to explain to the voters why he has lobbied for an organization and been the key lobbyist and given money to these particular politicians that are destroying our Texas values up here in the 13th Congressional District of Texas.
You've talked a lot about the background of yourself, contrasting with your opponent. You both have very unique viewpoints, I guess, in this race. Like we said, he's a lobbyist, Texas Cattle Feeders Association, and they've talked a lot about that. They've defended it, I guess you would say. But my question is, an article just came out showing that your opponent apparently lobbied against a Trump administration priority a few years ago, right after the president was elected, and that had to deal with country of origin labeling. So what's your stance on country of origin labeling?
Look, I think that everyone in this country right now wants to know where their beef comes from, right? We are in a big push right now. We've identified all these different issues where we're getting our medications and our food and everything from. We're relying on a lot of this stuff coming over from overseas, specifically China. There's a big push right now being led by the President of the United States for Made in America. I think that applies to our beef as well. I want to know where my beef's coming from. I want to make sure that if we have beef, that if we have cattle out there that need to go to slaughter, that we are not importing millions of head of cattle every year from Mexico, Canada, and wherever else, and saturating the market with those cattle at the expense of our good ranchers and ag folks here. We need to make sure that we are taking care of the folks in our country before we do that. Now, if we want to bring some of that stuff over because we have supply that outpaces demand, that's fine, but we're not in that situation right now. Right now, we're in a situation where our ranchers, our cattle producers can't find anything to do with their cattle. They can't take them to the feedlot. The feedlot's full. They can't take them to the packers because the packers can't slaughter anymore. And we've got this horrible situation right now where the industry is being controlled by the four large packers that we have here in the country. And if something happens to them, like it has with this coronavirus right now, it impacts our entire economy. And, the price of beef is going through the roof now. So I am for country of origin labeling. I think that we need to figure out how to make that happen. Now, my opponent will spin this over and over, and he'll say, well, I'm not for mandatory country of origin labeling. I'm for voluntary country of origin labeling. And I will tell him right now, what is stopping you from doing that right now? You can do voluntary country of origin labeling anytime you want. It doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. And I'll tell you the reason it's not going to happen is because the entire industry is controlled by those four packers I described. Even if you go and you look at the national NCBA, this is a lobbying group that's supposed to be lobbying in D.C. on behalf of the cattle producers. Half of that board are packers. And so it's it's somewhat of a corrupt system right now. I think there's a lot of people that are lining their pockets with a lot of money at the expense of our cattle producers here. And the country of origin labeling is one of those things that Mr. Winegarner can't say anything about because the vast majority of his campaign is being funded by packers right now.